is that it is going. All right. Yeah, that looks okay. How do you ask God for something?
You mean today, or how do you ask?
I'm saying, how does one, fine, I'm not going to make anybody like point a finger at themselves. How does one ask God for something?
Do you pray?
Okay, so
Okay, you can.
what does that then do? Because you got prayer, and then you've got receipt, right, of whatever it is that you're looking for, right? Whether it be a particular object, whether it be a particular event, whether it be a particular status, eventually you get the result, right? What happens in between?
You wait.
Okay, you're patient.
Process.
Dear God, I really would like a Lamborghini. Don't worry, I'm patient.
Please God, Lamborghini tomorrow. Please God, remember about my Lamborghini. Keep praying. And then you're run over by a Lamborghini. Oh gosh.
Okay, so
Two.
let me ask you this alternative question then, because we seem to be a little bit fuzzy on what's happening in the middle. Is it possible to get this through some other means? Right? This is saying that prayer will lead to the receipt. Is it possible to get the same thing without the prayer?
Go out and save your money and get the Lamborghini.
You could work for your Lamborghini, right?
Yes.
I don't think anyone who actually ever bought a Lamborghini worked for it, but that's a whole nother conversation about particular ways of focusing on life and what's actually worthwhile in life. No one ever saved their pennies and ended up with a Lamborghini.
Do what you need to do.
You could do what you need to do, right? Does that mean that if it is something beyond my capability and can only be done by God, that if I don't pray for it, it's not going to happen?
No. It can still happen, even if you don't pray.
Oh.
Because that might be part of what your destiny is.
So there may be some destiny involved here, right? And so
That's
that
it.
tech support.
If God's going to do what God's going to do, then I don't need to pray.
But you can get in
So
God's
where
way
does
to do it
that-
for you.
So where does that saying, how it goes, God helps those who helps themselves?
Exactly. God helps those who help themselves, right?
It also says God help those who get caught helping themselves.
Depends on how good your defense attorney is. So there seems to be this really big if question, but there's this really big how does the process work? How do I end up getting what I need, what I deserve, what I am fated to have? Do I pray? Do I work? Right? Do I just wait? Is it fate? Right? All the different things that could use to explain how this is going to happen. We're not really 100% sure. So how do you pick which technique to use? Use them all.
Yeah. Won't go wrong.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition, right? God fights on the side with the biggest gun. It's confusing. And you're going to see somebody faced with that confusion in our Torah portion. Because there is somebody who has an incredibly important job, and he's not entirely sure how he's going to be able to succeed in this job. Right? Because there is no more important job than finding someone a spouse.
Right.
Right? Right? How do you find a wife for someone? How do you find a husband for someone? Yeah. Try having that as your responsibility.
And you're sent off to.
Well, yeah. So we are on page 132 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, which is Genesis chapter 24 and verse 10. 132 if you are using the Eitz Chaim, but it's chapter 24, verse 10 if you are using any other copy of the Jewish Bible, Torah. Now, as a little side note, as you flip pages, sometimes you will find slight different chapter and verse headings between Jewish and non-Jewish sources, because we do sometimes divide how things lay out a little differently. Mostly the same, but there are some discrepancies. All right, we all set? Are you still willing to volunteer?
Okay, I'll still.
Okay. Even though it's getting so cold outside?
Oh my gosh, I can't stand it. I had to wear a coat the other day.
Oh. But only one coat
Only one, yes.
compared to up north.
Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and set out, taking with him all the bounty of his master. And he made his way to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor.
All right. So this is, we're going to call him Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, who has just taken an oath that he will find a bride from Abraham's people, which you may remember are back in Nahor, right there, and back up north from in the Syrian area of what we would call on a modern map. And so he is taking examples of Abraham's wealth in order to go back and persuade someone to return with him to the land of Canaan, because Isaac isn't supposed to leave the land, and he's also not supposed to marry anybody local. You may understand that's going to present a problem for him finding a wife then, right? For Isaac to find his own wife. If he can't leave and he can't marry anyone local, how is he supposed to meet a nice girl? And the way it's going to happen is Eliezer is going to meet a nice girl for you, and he'll bring her back. And that means there's going to need to be some persuasion to get this nice girl to come. We good?
Yep.
All right, onward.
Eliezer made the camels kneel down by the well outside the city at evening time, the time when women come out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune this day and deal graciously with my master Abraham.
All right, so what would we call his approach to how he's going to succeed in his issue here?
He's praying, but it's interesting, it's not his God.
Oh, right.
It's Abraham's God.
Right, he's saying, God of my master, right? What? It depends on your definition of Jewish. He is a member of Abraham's household. And what's that? But he's not related by blood.
And he would have been circumcised.
He would have been circumcised, right? So, and he certainly would be keeping Abraham's ways. So as far as the definition of Judaism goes in the ancient world, this is about as close as you get, because we don't have a Torah, we don't have a formal process. It's sort of what we got. And the same question, by the way, can be asked about Rebecca, who is going to come on the scene very soon, that she too is not Jewish in the classic sense of the term, because there's been no Torah, there's no formal sense of conversion, but she's about to join Abraham's household and become one of them.
She's
And-
related to him.
And she's related, but that relation, so is Lavan, her brother, who is this conniving snake, and I'm not sure we want to claim him as one of ours.
Yeah.
So there's this very fuzzy border at this particular moment until the Torah is given. It's very, very soft of who joins and how they join into the group. But there was a discussion of whether or not, if with Ishmael gone and if there was no heir to replace, that maybe Eliezer could have become the heir to Abraham. Especially since Lot had already sort of gotten out of the running.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's one way to look at it. It's like Genesis is really, I never thought of this before. It's really like one long primary process to see which candidates to continue are going to make it all the way to the end of the book. And we got a lot of people who drop out.
Our rabbis, they say, prayer, you can pray for yourself, you want the Lamborghini. But another way to pray is to pray for somebody else.
Right.
So that's what Eliezer does.
But
basically.
this is an interesting little question. Is he praying on behalf of Abraham and Isaac, or is he praying that he succeed so that he doesn't fail? Now, Abraham and Isaac will benefit if he doesn't fail.
Sounds like both.
And absolutely, there are many situations where praying for ourselves and praying for others are absolutely the same thing. But we do need to be aware that sometimes these are more interconnected. All right, onward.
Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw water. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's a prayer?
As the women.
Wait, but is that a prayer?
It is-
But I mean,
He's
Wouldn't the
very
prayer-
specific.
but wouldn't the prayer have just been, God, I'm going to be out here, and whichever one comes out first, that'll be the one that you want me to pick,
Oh.
Yeah.
right? Or God, I'm going to be out here, let me find the one that I need, because she'll be the one with a flower in her hair. She'll be the one that has a big A on her shirt, for Abraham or something. I mean, the prayer could have been completely random. He didn't have to say anything about, I'm going to ask this and she's going to do that. That sounds much less like a prayer and a lot more like a test.
Yes.
It does sound like that.
Yeah, because he says, you know, he kind of sets the criteria of the test.
Right.
And I'm gonna be here, which strikes me strange, you know, the women are all coming out, he's the man standing there.
He's a traveler though, right? So a traveler at the well is not that surprising.
Who has the hospitality and the
Right.
openness.
Or who has the jar to get the water.
Well, they're all coming with jars.
But he doesn't have it, that's why he has to ask the woman.
Right, and the others, we don't know, you know, how many, hi, can I have a drink? You know, get out of here.
Well,
You
and
know, that, you know.
so
Got that.
there is that.
He's setting up a kind of, it's a prayer in the sense
Next one.
that he's looking for a person who is caring.
Right, but he's not saying, let me pick one at random and I hope she'll be caring.
No.
He's
he
saying,
set
let
a
her
criteria.
demonstrate her caringness.
Right,
And then, well, wait a minute, then I'll know that's the one that you want, the one that you've decreed. So if he knows that God has already picked one, why have a test at all?
But maybe it's not. It sounds like more of a request to me.
Okay, so this whole prayer request test seems to be very confused, which is why you're probably not surprised the commentators have just gone to town on it. Because is he making just a straight prayer? I'm going to stand here and one of them is going to come out. No. Is he making a straight test? I'm going to stand here and one of them is going to help me in a way that will demonstrate the hospitality and gracious nature that is fitting for Isaac's bride.
right.
No, he's not just doing that either, because he's then saying the one that does that needs to also be the one you've picked, which is implying that there is still a fatalist element to this.
He doesn't know.
Right? It's like, I don't know. I'm hoping the one who responds the way I'm asking will be the one that she is supposed to be. I mean, what would have happened if the first girl who came out and he said, hey, I need water, and she said, oh, sure, I'll do your camels as well. And it turned out she was totally unsuitable. Right? What if she was already married? Oh, I mean, his test could have so easily failed.
But it didn't.
But it didn't. Exactly. And he seems to be implying that maybe it couldn't. That's what his prayer is. Let my test not only be a good test, but one that doesn't mess up. All right. So go ahead.
But wouldn't he only ask the question? Wouldn't he only ask water from a girl he thought was suitable?
How do you know which one is suitable?
How do you know? They're all
He
covered.
doesn't know them. He
Right.
just seen them for the
He-
first time.
Maybe they have
He doesn't have a JDate app. He's not like checking them. And it's like, oh no, she went to Brown. No, it's
For a lot of customs, the married girls and non-married girls are easily
distinguishable. So there might have been things that would set them apart in their culture that he would be able to tell whether married or unmarried just by looking at her. But there could be other things that might disqualify her. You know, she came from a bad family, although as we're going to find out, it's not exactly the greatest family. Although it is Abraham's family, which just goes to show you can't pick your family. So the story goes on that she comes out, she does exactly what he predicted, which is to say he asked for water and she does the water for all the camels as well. Remember how many camels there are? 10, right? It's an enormous quantity of camels. And
Especially since they weren't domesticated.
and what do camels famously do when they are thirsty? Drink a ton, right? That's the whole point. The reason they've got the hump is because when they drink, it gets stored. So to water 10 camels is an incredible amount of hospitality. This is not just like, you know, if I ask for one cookie, she'll offer me 2 cookies. This is really going above and beyond. And once that happens, he is like, wow, this is amazing. He gives her jewelry and then says, who are you? And she says, well, I'm, you know, the daughter of Bethuel, and, you know, my family is such and such. And he's like, woohoo, jackpot, right? Bingo, got it in one. And then he goes back to the family and proceeds to retell the story in order to convince them that, you know, this strange guy with the camels is a good place for their daughter to go, a good guy for the daughter to go with. But we don't have time to go through that whole back and forth, but it is a really interesting read because of the small subtleties. We'll talk about them a bit, of how he retells the story multiple ways in order to persuade these folks. So commentary, because otherwise we'll not be able to finish, because there's a few deep things that we're going to have to plow through. And we're on the side that begins with "for asked improperly." For made improper requests, or rather made requests in an improper manner. Are you all good? Okay. This is from Midrash Rabbah, if you don't mind.
4 asked improperly. 3 were granted their requests in a good way, but the 4th was not. The 4 are Eliezer,
Here in our story.
Caleb in Judges, Shaul in Samuel, and Yiftach in Judges.
All right, so Yiftach is the odd one out. He's the one who asked and it went badly, which is basically the death of his daughter. But the idea is that there are people who sometimes will set up tests or cases that they want to try and get God's decision or influence on something. And sometimes they ask wrongly, but it still works out okay. And sometimes it doesn't work out okay. So the idea that Eliezer is not alone in this is sort of what we're getting from this first midrash. So let's try and see what he was asking and why he structured it, at least the way, starting off with Rashi, of how it was understood.
So Rashi says that she is worthy of him, for she will perform acts of kindness, and she is fit to enter the house of Abraham.
All right, so as we already discussed, the reason why this test seems like a good idea to Eliezer at the time is because this is the characteristic that would be befitting of a new generation in Abraham's house. We just saw in last week's Torah portion when the angel showed up, how Abraham went to great lengths to greet them and be hospitable to them. So we've seen definitely this is a major part of his character. So the test, as we talked about, makes a lot of sense. However, Ramban still has some issues with this. Remember, Ramban, Nachmanides, as he's often called, often will argue with Rashi's choice from among our sages of how to explain the verse.
Yep, Rashi is incorrect. Because his interpretation still leaves doubt in the mind of Eliezer that the girl is the right one.
Right.
She will be selected by her behavior rather than by providence.
Right? So it's okay, she behaved the right way, but maybe she's not the right girl, because couldn't there be more than one girl who behaves in the right way? And then God would be taken out of the equation. We would no longer be handing this over to God's providence. We would be handing it over just to human action. And that seems to be a little unreliable. And Eliezer would still have to ask himself, well, she did what I asked, but is she the right one who did what I asked? And that's what Ramban is worried about.
Instead, it should be interpreted as follows. Make it happen that the girl I speak to will be the one that you have appointed. And by this, show kindness to Abraham, for I will then find out that she is from his extended family of good character and beautiful.
All right, so Ramban tries to take that second half of Eliezer's prayer request test and turn it into a condition that actually is proof, not a replacement of the work. So what he's praying is that there will be a test, there will be a work that she will do, and Eliezer plays his part as well. And then once that condition has been satisfied, then when he asks her who she is, it will be revealed that she is indeed the right person. So he has his final check that he can do before he actually heads back home with this lady. So he's praying that she will fulfill the test, and having done so, when she's asked about who she is, she will give a good answer, a suitable answer, meaning that she will indeed come from a good family. So in this way, Ramban says all the elements are completed, that not only is he praying and not only is there a test, but there is also this providential affirmation, this moment for it to have been arranged by God and for that arrangement to be revealed in a way that a simple behavior test couldn't have achieved on its own. Good? Good. All right. Rashi, on the other hand, wants to focus back on some of the conversation of how he engages with Rivka. Now, like I said, we didn't have time to read all of this in the Torah, but hopefully you're at least vaguely familiar with this part of the story, and if not, I'll explain as needed.
So Eliezer said, "Whose daughter are you?" He asked her this after giving her the gifts because he was confident that in the merit of Abraham, the Holy One, blessed be he, had caused his way to prosper.
All right, so Rashi is pointing out that if you read through the text, after he asks her after he's given her gold and gifts, then he asks her, whose daughter are you? And Rashi's going, wait a minute. Shouldn't you have found that out first before you began giving the gifts? Because what happens if it turns out you gave the gifts and she's like, oh, and by the way, and it's like, whoa, no, that's not going to be acceptable. So why did he give her the gold first? And Rashi says, because this is just how confident Eliezer was. Right? He knew, having seen the test be performed so beautifully, that this had to be the girl, and asking her who she was a mere formality, because clearly God would not let this be the wrong girl. And therefore the gold came first and the identity came second. However, Rashi's going to have to explain then why in verse 47, when Eliezer is explaining the whole situation to her family, he reverses those events. And he talks about finding out who she was and giving the gifts as though they happened in the opposite order, right? That he found out who she was first and then gave her the gifts.
Yeah, when it says, and I asked and I placed, Eliezer reversed the sequence of events because, in fact, he had first given her the jewelry and then asked about her family.
Which is what we talked about on the comment from verse 23.
But he changed the order, lest they catch him in his words and say, how did you give her the jewelry when you did not yet know who she was?
Okay, because any normal person would say, what?
Who are you?
Well, not just that, but nobody gives out gold gifts unless they know who the person is. Of course, no one except someone who has lived among Abraham and Abraham's life, where he has seen miracles performed with some regularity. So Rashi's explanation of why he changed them is because he knew he was dealing with a family that wouldn't understand what it meant to trust God, that wouldn't understand what it meant to trust providence. And therefore, he had to explain it as though it was a more natural cycle, which is, I found out that she was nice, I found out what family she was from, and then I gave her the presents. Rather than I found out she was nice, gave her the presents, confident that she would come from a good family that would be suitable. Right? He put it in an order that would be understandable to the rest of these folks. Does that make sense? All right, it's a good explanation, which Ramban doesn't think is necessary.
Because the verse omits the deed, for it should have said, and the man took a golden ring and put it on her nose and 2 bracelets upon her hands. Therefore, I say, the interpretation of that verse is as follows. He took the jewelry he would give her and then said, whose daughter are you? After she told him, then he placed the jewelry upon her. Here, however, the Torah omits the actual giving, and similarly in many places.
Right, so when it says the man took a golden ring on her nose and bracelets on her hands, Ramban is narrowing in and saying, yeah, but it doesn't actually say he put them.
Right.
So maybe what happened was he reached into his bag and said, by the way, whose girl are you? And when she gave the answer, he's like, great. And then he handed it over. So he got out the loot, found out the identity, and then it went on to her. And the fact that the Torah doesn't spell out all of those different little steps, so the Torah often will omit little verbs here and there because the context makes it clear what's happening. Which answer do you prefer? Rashi's, where he just was relying and faithful and trusting that this was all going to work out, and if not, he'd just have to beat her up and take the gold back, or the idea that he actually did check who she was before he handed over the loot. You like Rashi, you like the faith, you like faith, you like providence and trust, and you like a little bit more practicality of this. So he may have been confident enough to get the gold out, but would he really have put it on without double checking that she was the right one?
Then why ask God? I mean, you have to have the faith.
So why ask God to be involved at all?
At all.
Right? Why doesn't it just say in our first section that we were reading, and Eliezer sat down and he thought to himself, I know, I'll put together a test. And this is how I'll know who the right person is. Why does it say that he's praying to God? Why is he speaking to God if he's not expecting God to play some role in this?
Because earlier, and I know we're going to later conversation this, earlier Abraham tells him, God will send his messenger ahead of you. and Eliezer knows Abraham and
Mhm.
knows his relationship with God. So he knows that there's a messenger who's out here working in tandem.
So if he already knows that Abraham has promised that God would make sure that his
This
quest
is
was
gonna come
successful,
together.
why is he doing anything? Just walk through the town blindfolded, and the first girl you bump into is going to be the right one.
Because he still wants to make sure he's being accurate with this mission.
How could I make sure that I'm more accurate than what God has arranged for me?
God let me know that this is the right one.
It's the one you bumped into.
It's a
It
bit
must
of-
be the right
A
one.
little bit of doubt. A little bit of doubt.
Okay, so are we then criticizing him that he is actually showing doubt where he shouldn't have doubt, or are we going to praise him that he is showing a little bit of sechel, of sense, rather than relying blindly, in quotes, the walking through the streets, just reaching out, rather than just relying on blindly, he's using a little bit of common sense to say there's got to be more to this than just pin the tail on the bride.
There's a difference between God being our partner
Mm-hmm.
and God being like we're like blind dogs on a leash and God leading us around.
So who has their hand on the steering wheel? God or Eliezer?
Both.
Oh.
All is free
Wait,
will, all is
he,
predestined.
if you look back at the beginning of his prayer or
Right.
whatever, he asked personally, grant me
Mhm.
good fortune this day.
May it be.
May it be. Okay, so he's kind of,
Let it be.
Also-
Let it
also-
happen today for me.
yeah, let it happen today. for
Today,
me.
I got a long journey.
I-
Just showed up. Here I
Yeah,
am.
but he says good fortune, I don't know how that translates in Hebrew, but it's almost like he's saying, help me to do this, to come up with a way to do this.
He just says, let it happen. The good fortune is a little bit of a stretch, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
It's not like, Mazel Tov or something. It's,
Verse 12.
yeah, it's the Hakrei Na, right? So let it happen, please.
Let it happen.
Let it
Right.
happen this day.
This day, right? And then he says, ve'aseh chesed, right? And do chesed
Chesed.
for Abraham,
Okay,
right? Remember, chesed is the word that usually means loving kindness. Here it's being translated as graciousness
Or faith.
or graciously, yeah.
But yeah, and deal kindly by Lord Abraham.
Sometimes when we pray, we're actually meditating
Mm-hmm.
and we're running through, at least I am, scenarios in our head,
Mhm.
what could be, what could not be. And maybe what he's doing is he's running this by God to see if God thinks this is a good idea for a possible backup or, something I can do to help
Right.
be your partner in
So-
the selection.
So in the Amidah, when we the weekday Amidah, right, when we go through the 13 bakashot, the requests, right, like when we say atach onein ladam da'at, right, you are the one who gives knowledge to the human being. Are we then saying, I will sit, and if you want me to be clever, I'll be clever, and if you don't want me to be clever, I'll stay stupid? Or are we actually saying, God is the source of knowledge, but I have to do something to put that knowledge in my head? Right? Or do we say it's in God's hands, right? If God wants me to be stupid, God will keep me stupid. If God wants me to be smart, I'll wake up like Einstein tomorrow. It's not that simple, is it?
But the other part of prayer that's in the prayer book is the source of prayer should be connected to creation, the created world as it is at that moment. And so here Eliezer he's at a new place, at this new time,
Mm-hmm.
new people around.
Yep.
right.
And so here he's connecting to his place, to the time, to the people.
All right, let's talk about that place, right? Which is actually going to lead me on to the Chizkuni comment of why did he pick a test at the well, right? Why didn't he just go knock on a house's door and say, hey, I'm a traveler. Could someone help me with a drink of water, and then do it there? Why is he doing this out at the town fountain? If you don't mind.
At town's water fountain, this is where I can test a potentially eligible girl on her suitability as Yitzhak's wife to be. When such a girl is away from her home, whatever she decides to do has not been what she has been told to do by her mother or father, but reflects her true personality.
Ain't that the truth?
He wants to see her by herself.
Right. If he went and knocked on every door in the village, then whether the girl was going to be hospitable of her own choosing or not would never be revealed. It would just be if she knew that if she wasn't hospitable, her parents would whip her, or if she was hospitable, her parents might whip her, depending upon what her parents were like, right? So at the well, there's no one to tell her what to do except for herself. And therefore, it's her own inclination that is being shown there. So again, it's another reason why this test is actually a very good test.
Yeah.
And also then makes us wonder whether this is really meant to be a prayer and just meant to be a test. Right? Is he looking for a miracle here, or is he just testing? Or is the miracle going to be that even away from home, she's a good person? Okay, so let's just see. Or HaChaim is going to try and work out how this is going to work, given, as we mentioned before, that Abraham had already told him, you will succeed. Right? Isaac will have a bride from this place, and you will bring her. Why is he still nervous? Why is he still praying? Why is he coming up with tests and divisions? Like we said, you could just walk into the room and have a dartboard, pull the names of the villagers out of a hat, and he would be destined to succeed. Why is he still nervous? Well, Or HaChaim, I think, has a brilliant insight.
Eliezer was certain that because of his master's prayer, he was sure God would send his angel ahead of Eliezer to facilitate his mission, and it would be fulfilled. He added a prayer, added one expressing the hope that he would be found worthy to be the instrument through which Abraham's prayer would be fulfilled.
All right, so he's not worried that Isaac won't have a kid or won't have a bride. He's worried that he won't get to be the person who will find the bride for Isaac, right? He's not worried about the mission success. He's worried about his role in the mission.
Yeah, it
Because
happened.
he swore to Abraham to bring a woman.
Exactly. And he has confidence that God will provide a bride for Isaac, but maybe through some other means, right? Remember we talked about with our different arrows that maybe I won't get to do it. Maybe someone else will show up with the bride. It could be that while I'm doing this, I'm not found to be worthy enough to be the one who does this. And maybe someone else traveling from Haran has already shown up back home, and they've got this girl in tow that's the bride. And now I've missed out on my opportunity to be able to do this, right? Maybe I'm not worthy to be the instrument of this successful matchmaking.
Yeah, because it happens on occasion that the prayer of the original petitioner goes unanswered due to the unworthiness of the petitioner's messenger.
Right, which makes it a doubly distressing. Because what happens not just if if I don't get to fulfill it, what happens if it doesn't get fulfilled at all because I don't deserve to fulfill it? Right? I'm not fit to be able to do this. Maybe I'm not worthy to be part of this story. I mean, think about Eliezer. I mean, he is very much respected in Abraham's household, but he's also not part of Abraham's line. He is Abraham's servant. He is not somebody that is going to be prominent in the story. Maybe he's worried that he doesn't deserve to have this center stage for a while. And so therefore, maybe he will not succeed in this. And if he doesn't succeed, then maybe the whole endeavor will fail. Right? If Moses had not been worthy enough, would we have been liberated at that point from Egypt? There are numerous traditions in different communities that say that every generation could have the Mashiach, could have the Messiah, if the generation was worthy of living at the time when Mashiach arrived. And since each generation so far has not been, the Mashiach has not arrived, right? But it's our worth that is holding it back. Maybe his worth would hold back, would delay, perhaps even permanently, the proper arrangement for Isaac. Because after all, if the merit of the people don't matter, then why bother being good? Which, of course, comes back to then say why he's putting up a test all about goodness, because he wants somebody who doesn't just believe in God. He wants somebody who's willing to believe in God enough to be good, which don't always go together, unfortunately. All right. Sorry.
I find it interesting. The name Eliezer,
Mm-hmm.
it means in Hebrew, God will help.
Exactly right.
And it's interesting that it's the person that is going to find
Who needs a lot of help.
a lot of help.
Exactly. All right, he continues.
The reason Eliezer had to proceed in this order was that he feared Abraham's family might deceive him and try to palm off one of their maidservants on him, claiming she was their family.
Right? And why give up one of our real daughters? Just give him one of the maidservants. We'll get the loot. She'll be gone. And yeah, that's good.
We'll buy another one.
right? And after we meet Lavan, we'll understand that that is the kind of thing he might have tried to pull. Remember, he does pawn off one daughter in the next generation when it's Jacob's turn to get a bride.
That's why Eliezer stipulated that the girl who would be regarded as suitable for Isaac should proceed to do more than he asked of her by also offering water to his camels. This would be characteristic of a girl who was related to Abraham.
Right? If she was just doing her job, then she wouldn't have done what he had asked, right? She wouldn't have done the extra. She was just, in quote, a maidservant, because, it's hard enough doing whatever the family's asking, let alone for strangers. But this showed that she really was who he was expecting. And
right, and it's hard enough to do what the family asks, let alone more than the family asks. Right. In fact, Rebecca described herself immediately as the daughter of Bethuel.
Right. He didn't ask other people who is she. He asked her, and she answered clearly. Now, if she would have been a maidservant and he had her alone at the well, she wouldn't have thought to lie. Right? She wouldn't have said, "Oh, I'm the daughter of Bethuel," because she wouldn't have known that this random stranger was about to make her family very rich. She would have just said, "Oh, I'm a servant of the house of Bethuel." So this is another facet of how the test was put together so well in order to actually assure that it would be the right person and the right type of person. All right, turn the page. We're going to do a little bit of Hebrew work here, just because I happened to come across this and found it absolutely fascinating. And I'll explain as we get to it.
You will find the respective attributes of the patriarchs alluded to in the story of Eliezer's journey to secure a wife for Isaac. In one of the chapters, Eliezer prays that God should perform an act of chesed,
kindness, right?
That is Abraham's cardinal virtue. Perform the kindness for Abraham.
Right. So Abraham is a man of chesed. Therefore, God, please do chesed for him. Right. It's very tit for tat.
And in the chapter, we read, "I shall also draw water for your camel." This alludes to the attribute of gevura, or strength, Isaac's special characteristic.
And so this is a little bit more obtuse, but I think what he's getting at here is the idea that it is her strength of character and her physical strength that is being represented here. The other commentators go into great detail of exactly how much effort it takes to water 10 camels that have been traveling. That this is not just a strengthly of character, this is physically, you've got to be strong to be able to do this. And so therefore that's linking her up to Isaac through this gevura, this might.
The Kabbalists have adopted this name from the words in our daily prayer. What name is he talking about?
Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, right? The Ata Gibor, Gevura. They're saying that the first prayer is really reflecting more of Abraham. The second prayer is really reflecting more of Isaac. And by the way, the third prayer is let's see who comes to services. The Kedusha, right? And the Kedusha is where we are imagining ourselves in the company of the angels. Which patriarch was in the company of the angels going up and down a ladder? Jacob, right? 1, 2, 3, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We have the three different feelings that are being linked up right here. So you're looking at me with some skepticism.
No, we rise, what we're repeating is Isaiah.
We're repeating Isaiah, but the idea of which patriarch was most intimately associated with the idea of this ascension and descension of the angels. Exactly. But yes, we're quoting from all over, actually in all of the different prayers. We're actually quoting an awful lot. That's why it's good to have a siddur with footnotes.
Right.
Kabbalists have used this to explain why we change the order of praise for God in the last part of the Nishmat prayer on Rosh Hashanah.
All right. So how many people get to services within the first 15 minutes on Rosh Hashanah morning?
First 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of us in the room. Not a lot. If you ever do come, hint, hint, and you come also on a regular Shabbat, you'll notice there is a tiny little variance between how we concluded the Nishmat and begin with the Shochein Ad section in that section of the service. On the right-hand side in the Hebrew, in the box, we have the Hebrew for a regular Shabbat service, the Befi Yesharim Tit Halal. And if you look carefully on that, you'll see that I've bolded the first word of each of the first letter of each of the second word. And what does that spell?
Yitzchak.
Yitzchak, right? So those four phrases spell out Yitzchak's name as an acronym. On Rosh Hashanah, it looks like the left-hand column. And what do you notice? And if you notice in the left-hand column, because of the changes, we still have Yitzchak as the name,
Right.
but in the third word,
Oh,
in the third letter, it spells out Rivka, right?
Oh.
So Isaac and Rebecca's acronyms are included when we get to Rosh Hashanah.
wow.
Isn't that clever? I
Yes,
told you that was
is
good.
so
Now you know why I wanted to share that.
Yeah.
That slight little change. And now part of that they try to explain that because this is Yom Hadin, this is the day of judgment. Now it gets a little more confusing because among the Sephardim, they traditionally always use the left-hand box, even for regular Shabbats,
Right.
whereas the Ashkenazim have the two different variations. So I don't want you to read too much into the idea that this is somehow like a perfect mystical understanding, because depending upon which city you grew up in, this may or may not be happening in your shul. But the idea that someone was clever enough to embed within our prayers the idea of Isaac and Rebecca together, I think it just shows how carefully crafted our liturgy was and how easy it is to miss sometimes the underlying insights that were implanted within our text. And the idea that we would see Isaac and Rebecca together when we get to that point. So with that said, just, come early to services and you'll find these things. All right, but back to our actual story of the tests and miracles and whether it's even appropriate to ask for signs and wonders to tell us what's going on.
So I'll read down under the box.
Sorry, that should be a Drashot Haran, right? It's not the Deharot. I misspelled the citation. At the very, very bottom.
Oh, down
Yeah,
there.
I want to make sure people have the right footnote if they want to look this up.
Okay. A diviner, Kosem. There are some men whose imaging power is so strong that they can sense and foretell somewhat of the future. This power must be aroused, and to this end, they resort to certain motions and stratagems. This is what scripture refers to in Hosea when it says, "My people ask counsel of a piece of wood, and their staff speaks to them."
Okay, so is he saying this works or doesn't work?
He's saying it does.
It does, kind of.
Yeah.
Right, which is actually not that hard to believe. I mean, the language may be a little different from what we would say in the modern world, but if you were to say that there was somebody who was, meditating on the data they just collected from their financial review to know whether or not to invest in a particular stock, they're not actually like doing soothsaying. They are trying to figure out the future based off the data that they've currently had, but they're doing it at a level that isn't of conscious thought, right? Maybe they darken the room, maybe they stare at a candle, maybe they talk to a piece of wood, right? They're doing some ritual, or, if it's the usual Wall Street, they're throwing a dart at a board to decide whether to buy or sell. So there's some sort of ritual that helps them focus, that helps them try and bring this image to mind of what they need to do. Now, are they always right? Absolutely not. Right, but there are people who do try to do this, and that is part of the problem. Is that when you try to do this in this way, it is inconsistent, it is flawed, and you may get the right answer sometimes, and those you publish widely, and you may get the wrong answer sometimes, and those you try to cover up or pretend like you actually got it right. Anyone who's ever tried to make sense out of Nostradamus, it knows exactly what that looks like. So the idea that it is possible for people to sometimes be able to predict the future from current data, yeah, that's what we do. The idea that sometimes people would make that look like a special talent as opposed to just, they're clever. Well, yes, there have been people who have done that too, which, by the way, we are not supposed to go along with, right? Someone who talks to a stick of wood and that's their way of figuring out the future, we don't take that as being an acceptable means of figuring out the future. If you want to figure out the future, you talk to a prophet or you use your head. Right? You don't just pretend like, well, I've thought about this long and hard while staring at the entrails of a chicken, and this is what's going to happen. That Judaism says we don't do that.
What did you mean by meditate?
What do I mean by meditate? So in the most generous way of describing this, it would be not using conscious thought, but simply allowing your mind to be blank and waiting for the answer and the image to pop into it. Right? That would be like the kindest way to interpret what's being discussed here. But what Judaism is still trying to say is that even that we don't rely on. Right? We don't say, this is God giving you an answer, or it's been revealed to you. It's okay, your brain was processing it without you focusing on it, and eventually an answer popped into your head, but I'm not going to give any special status to that answer. I'm not going to say, oh, because you did it in this special ritual, therefore it must be true. It just means, yeah, you might have figured it out, and you might be totally wrong. And unfortunately, because you did it in that manner, we can't check your work. Right? That's why, remember, your math teachers always wanted you to show your work. All right, but there is another time of doing this, and this is called the soothsayer.
Yes, the soothsayer, the Meonen, is one who engages in the selection of days. It's mentioned in the Sanhedrin. Today is propitious for going forth.
Right, there are lots of people who would use signs and augury to try and figure out what was a good or bad moment to do different things.
And if one would ask, if one is forbidden to resort to these signs, then how are we to understand Chulin?
Also in the Talmud.
Rav would test by means of a ferry. If it came toward him, he would see that as a propitious sign.
Right, so he stands at the edge of the river, he sees a boat on the river, and if the boat comes towards him, it must be a good thing. If the boat goes away from him, it must be a bad thing. Right? He's rolling the dice by which way the boat might happen to move. That seems to be problematic, right?
Yes.
That's boats and chicken entrails, is this
Right.
really that different, right? Throwing bones.
There's a roll dice.
Exactly. So there seems to be a question mark here.
What difference is there between a ferry and other signs?
Right? Really?
The answer is, although Rav tested by means of a ferry, he did not make his future action entirely dependent upon the result of that test, but only sought some indication of whether he would meet with success. And even if the sign was negative, he would not abandon his undertaking, knowing, as he did, that the Blessed One can change everything according to his will.
So anyone here ever do eeny, meeny, miny, mo?
Yeah.
Right? or ever do the, pull petals off a flower, he loves me, he loves me not, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when you get to the end and you don't like the answer,
You get another flower.
you get another flower, you do eeny, meeny, miny, mo again. 2 out of 3, exactly. So that was what Rav would do, right? He would get an indication, and then he would use that to see whether or not that indication seemed right. This was just one way of helping to move him from a moment of indecision into, okay, now it looks like it's a negative. Yeah, but negative doesn't seem right, so I'm going positive, right?
Sound like that
He
answer.
wouldn't rely solely on what he saw. He would simply use it as a tilting in one direction that he was still more than welcome to tilt back against if he thought there was good reason to do so.
But he lived, okay, Rob lived
1,500
along
years
the
ago.
river,
Yeah.
along
Weren't
the
there plenty
river.
of boats?
Yeah, and the ferry had a schedule. I hate to
Well,
say that. How-
Eeny,
how-
meeny, miny, mo is also eeny, meeny, miny, mo is also predictable. So is the pulling the petals off of a flower. If you know how many petals there are, you should be able to figure this out before you pull the first one.
But you still, people in our.
We often need something to push us into an answer to then decide whether that answer is correct. And that second step of deciding whether the answer we've now, in quote, received is correct is why having a brain is rather important, as Iran is going to continue to explain.
So augury is forbidden only to him who relies on it implicitly.
Right? I know what, the fairy came at me, so this is what I'm doing. Right? I don't need to think about this anymore.
But if you would ask, then these two, Eliezer and Jonathan, were confirmed augurers.
Right? Doesn't it seem like Eliezer is just saying, hey, whenever this magic event happens, that's the what I'm doing.
She waters the camels.
Right.
That's it. How could such a thing be said of righteous men such as these? The answer? Augury is forbidden only insofar as it is not dictated by intellect. But whatever is dictated by intellect is not augury, but it's by the way of the world. And it doesn't differ in any way from saying, if it rains tomorrow, we shall sow the seeds.
Right? Exactly. It's like, is that like relying on signs and portents? Oh, if it rains tomorrow, I will bring an umbrella. Right? That's not like, I'm not deciding whether to bring an umbrella based on a sign or wonder. I'm deciding to bring an umbrella based on the conditions of the world I'm in. Right? That's what you're supposed to do. That's not, looking for a miracle. That's looking at the world in a way that was understandable because God gave us the gift of comprehension. Onward.
Oh, so what of these two? So what these two did was dictated by intellect. Eleazar, the servant of Abraham, who knew all that befell his master's son, was the direct result of divine providence, especially the wife that fell to his lot, posited that the woman most excellent in character would be the woman for Isaac. But how would he recognize her?
Right. Again, there was no J date back then.
If she were a maiden who, although young in years, did not stay at home but went out to draw water, a task demanding great effort and toil, and if, in addition, she was so strong in character as to take no account at all of her toil, but to find it easy to do good to one she didn't even know, this would indeed reflect sublime character and show her to be the woman falling to the lot of the righteous. This is not augury. This is profound exercise of intellect.
All right.
Boy, what about it?
It wasn't a random test, right? He didn't say whichever girl comes out with a flower in her hair, right? Whichever girl comes out with a red sash, right? He picked exactly what he thought would demonstrate the character that was needed to be the bride of Isaac and to be then the next line of the house of Abraham. And that's fine. He's not just relying on miracles and wonders. He is instead setting up exactly what he's hoping to see. Now, he is relying on the fact that what he's hoping to see will indeed reveal a person that is the right person for Abraham. But he's not doing this through a blind test. He's doing it through a carefully created test.
It's also different from Lot's choosing of the valley to live in. It's not just because she looks good.
Absolutely,
Not just because
yes.
of the good jugs she's got.
Yes.
She's got
He's doing it entirely because of the character, not just because of her
not
appearance.
because of looks.
Right. He's not saying, I'll pick the prettiest girl who comes. He's saying, I'm going to pick the girl that shows the best character. And that I know will be the one that is right because I know what you want for Isaac and for Abraham.
Is this similar to the story of Solomon cutting the baby in half?
In a sense, in the sense that he is setting up a condition which will reveal a truth that might be hard to get in any other way. Because if you ask everybody in the village who's the kindest girl, you're probably not going to get the answer that is closest to the truth. Because either there'll be one girl with a reputation for kindness who isn't so kind in her heart. You might get somebody with a reputation as being mean, but that may just be because she doesn't go along with everyone else's evil behavior. So he couldn't just take a survey. He needed something that would be able to demonstrate it categorically. And that's why this whole watering the camels thing is a very significant bar for her to pass to then be able to see what kind of person she is. So to come back to our question of whose hand's on the wheel, right? It's more a question of, God is the foot on the accelerator and we've got the hands on the wheel, right? God is giving us our direction. He's giving us our power, our potion, our force. Thank you. Exactly. As we move forward, but we still have to decide what we're aiming for, how we're going to direct, and God will get us there, but we have to choose the right path to follow. Otherwise, we're going to, just drive into a tree.
But it's also, he goes halfway. I mean, he's there. He first does the effort to physically be there.
Right.
Then he prays.
And
There's a lesson in that. We have to do our work.
Well, and
We
even
have
what
to do
he's
our part.
right, and even what
then
he's
God will meet us.
even when he prays, he still prays for something that he'll have to participate in.
Right.
Right? He still says, "I will ask." He is still engaging in this action. It's not just, okay, I'm leaving your hands now that I've traveled, hundreds of miles. It's still, I will be involved in this process. And the Torah doesn't tell us whether there was anyone else involved, whether there were other girls who refused his request, or maybe just the fact that Rivka was first is already showing us that God is trying to make sure this will pass, come out correctly. But it is amazing to see that Yitzchak and Rebecca do end up finding their way together. And in terms of the text, being the couples that seem to have the happiest relationship in the entirety of the first three patriarchs, right? Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, they have their problems, and Abraham and Sarah have difficulties as well. It is Isaac and Rivka that seem to handle most issues with the least amount of strife between them. So
But it does point out that Rivka is very strong.
yes,
Strong.
she
I mean,
she is
really, I mean, not just physically strong.
yes.
Because there must
Strong
have,
will.
if you
Well-
bring 10 camels, you have to have somebody helping you bring
But
those 10
The
camels.
the fact that she was able to be who she was, growing up where she did, is the
amazing.
greatest strength that she was able to demonstrate.
But
Right? And she would have been an outstanding person even if she had grown up in Abraham's house. But to
Right.
grow up in Bethuel and with a brother like Lavan, to grow up in that house
Right,
and to still be the person she was is absolutely amazing.
But we don't know how her father was.
Well, we know that
we do.
we know that her
Later on.
well, we know that her
How
father
we
is
change.
more than happy to go along with this and tries to change the bargain and is not really being very helpful to all of us. And he talks one way and then does another.
Yes, but they also say we have to ask her.
But they maybe have learned at this point that they can't get her to do anything if she doesn't agree.
No, but she- clearly
She's not
in-
doing anything
She's in
without.
command of the
Maybe she's
situation.
Yes,
She is
yes.